Great. Hi there, I'm Stephanie Talawetsky. This is a grant-funded project with Capitol Hill Village. As you know, today we are going to be talking about transportation here in DC. We're going to be talking about some programs that are specific to older adults. And then I am happy to answer questions along the way or at the end. So feel free to jump in if you have any questions, and we will go from there. So let's go ahead and get started. There we are. So like I said, in today's presentation, we are going to talk about different transportation options here in DC, including public transit, ride shares, active modes like biking and walking. We're going to talk about community resources and programs that support accessible and affordable transportation solutions. And then we are also going to be thinking about what our own individual transportation needs are, to kind of help get us thinking about not only what our current sort of transportation needs are, but also thinking about what our future needs could look like. So, the importance of transportation. Obviously, transportation is an important part of modern life. It connects people, goods, and services. Transportation helps facilitate social interactions and shapes the way we live, work, and interact with our surroundings. And then these are just a couple of the different transportation options. Not that I necessarily think that everybody is using air balloon to get from point A to point B, but you get the idea. So, transportation helps us remain socially engaged, maintain independence, and access necessary amenities. So when it comes to being socially engaged, transportation helps us visit friends and family, attend community events and social gatherings, participate in recreational activities like going to the park or the gym, and commuting to work or school for the folks that that's relevant for. So with the Brookland Intergenerational Village, transportation will help folks get to and from there and some of the different services, meetings, etc. that they offer. Transportation is also something that helps us pursue things like hobbies and interests. You know, maybe you want to stop by the record store, the yarn shop, or a food festival that's on the other side of town. And being able to get to things like that is important. And I kind of want us to be thinking about, you know, as we age, there are a lot of different ways that we can get from point A to point B. And sort of being able to be aware of those options is an important way for us to continue to live the lives that we want to live. Transportation also helps us access necessary amenities, obviously things like doctor's appointments, grocery stores, the pharmacy, educational facilities. And then here's a point that I'm going to touch on throughout the presentation. Without adequate transportation options, people may face significant barriers to meeting their basic needs. And that is the thing that I don't want to happen. And so that's why information like what I'm sharing here today is so important. Things that I do want to touch on when transportation is tough. So mobility challenges exist. I think that for individuals with disabilities, older adults, and those living in underserved areas often face unique mobility challenges. And I want us to be thinking about this because disability can happen at any time. You know, you might be someone who walks to most of the things that you need in your life. I know that's the case for me. I live in Columbia Heights, DC. I live in a super walkable neighborhood. You know, I walk to the grocery store. I walk to my friends' houses. I walk to the library, things like that. Well, last year I was seriously injured, and I wasn't walking for essentially a month. And so walking was no longer a mode of transportation that I was able to utilize. So I then ended up having to have my dad, who is local, drive me to things like doctor's appointments and stuff like that. And without having that and like having him able to help me get around, I would have had serious trouble meeting my, you know, daily needs. So I want everybody to be kind of thinking about, okay, so if this form of transportation is no longer an option for me, what else can I use to get around? Which is why we're going to be talking about a bunch of different options here in the area. Yeah, it's important to ensure that folks know about all of their different options, so that they're able to access all of the different necessary amenities that they need to. And I also want to touch on how even here in DC, not every neighborhood is equal when it comes to transportation options. There are a lot of neighborhoods here in DC that don't have adequate access to Metro Rail. Um, there are some neighborhoods that don't have a lot of bus routes that go through them. And so having an understanding of like what's available in your neighborhood, and then going one step further to kind of have an understanding of how transportation services are funded and implemented, can then help communities advocate for services that better meet their needs. And we're going to talk about this a little more later on in the presentation, but I want us to leave this conversation with an idea of, if you are someone who uses these systems, I want you to know how you can offer feedback about them when there are opportunities to do so, because a lot of decisions are made about these different programs and whatnot, and making sure that the people who run them hear from the people who actually use them is such an important part to making sure that these programs are actually useful. So like I said, we'll get into that a little more later, but I just wanted to kind of have us thinking about these ideas. So today we are going to go ahead and talk about 4 different like major categories of transportation options. We're going to be talking about public transportation. We're going to be talking about non-emergency medical transportation. We'll be talking about paratransit, and we'll be talking about ride shares. So, the role of public transit. Well-developed public transportation systems can help greatly improve access to essential services, particularly for those without personal vehicles or who do not drive. And there are a lot of reasons why someone might choose to not have a car, why someone might choose to not drive, especially living in a city like DC. I know for me, I choose to not have a car because it's expensive, because parking is a nightmare, and because I am capable of getting around the city using other methods. You know, I am doing a lot of walking. I'm using public transit, things like that. So yeah, we'll talk about the different forms of public transit here in DC, how they're used. And then I want to emphasize that both reliable and affordable public transit can help alleviate transportation-related barriers. All about WMATA, the Washington Metropolitan Area Transit Authority. So here in DC, we have Metro Rail and Metro Bus. So Metro Rail, of course, is the subway system connecting neighborhoods and destinations throughout DC, but also into the suburbs of Maryland and Virginia. And then Metro Bus complements the Metro Rail system by offering bus services between near subway stops and then kind of outside of the subway system. There are also bus systems that are run by the neighboring suburbs as well, that help connect the entire system. So bunch of different routes all throughout the region. Yeah. And then something that I want to make sure that I'm emphasizing is that with the senior Smart Trip card, you get a 50% discount on all WMATA rides. All you need for the senior Smart Trip card is to be 65 and older and a DC resident. There are a couple of different ways that you can apply for this senior Smart Trip card. The address that I have listed in the presentation, the Metro Transit Accessibility Center, that's just one of the locations. That's the one that's closest to L'Enfant Plaza. But in a recent presentation that I was doing, I learned that they also you can also get the senior Smart Trip card at the Silver Spring Transit Center. So that's an option if going to L'Enfant Plaza is a little more like complicated or out of the way for you. And then I have also heard that WMATA will often do, like, if there are community events that are like geared towards older adults, WMATA will also often have staff kind of like popping up at those and being able to get folks signed up for the senior Smart Trip card. So you might see them out and about in the community. But this address that's in the presentation, that for sure is where you can go and apply for one. And then all you need to bring is a government issued photo ID with proof of age and then proof that you live in Washington, D.C. And that's 50% off of all fares. And the way that that works, the fare prices for using the Metro rail system is based on a couple of different things. Most typically, it's based on how far you're going. So that's going to vary based on what trip you're taking. But that's a 50% discount off of whatever that cost is. And then with the recent budget changes, each bus trip is now $225. And so with the senior Smart Trip card, that's a 50% discount on that $225. So highly recommend getting the senior Smart Trip card if you're 65 and older. 50% off is a huge discount. It makes a big difference. And like I said, there are a couple of different ways you can go about getting that. You cannot apply for it online. It's something that you have to do in person. I think it's because of the ID requirement. But yeah, wanted to make sure I touch on that. Super, super useful. Highly recommend it. And then here is the current Metro map. There have been some updates in the last few years. The Silver Line does now go all the way out to Dulles. I think those are the main. There have been a couple of station name changes, but other than that, that's the big update. And so let's chat about nearby public transportation options. The nearest Metro stop, of course, is going to be the Catholic University Brookland Metro stop, which is on the Red Line. And then as for nearby bus lines, I know this one. What is it? Is it the H3 that goes through Brookland? I'm not sure if anybody has any insight. I don't know, Miss Kathy, if you are a bus user, feel free to chime in. But
No,
yeah,
I honestly don't.
yeah, no worries. H2, H4, it looks like are some popular ones. It looks like the 80 comes through as well. And so there's going to be, north-south routes. The H2 and the H4 look like they're primarily east-west routes, so that's going to connect Brookland to some of the western parts of the city, things like that. But yeah, both are available. Lots of different options in Brookland. And then I'm not sure where you are in the neighborhood, but I'm sure that there are other options too. So let's go ahead and move into non-emergency medical transportation. So I want to emphasize that this is not emergency transportation. This is primarily for folks who don't have access to private vehicles or can't use public transit. And these are to help folks get to things like doctor's appointments, things like that. So MTM is a transportation management company that coordinates non-emergency medical transportation specifically for DC Medicaid recipients. So if you are a Medicaid recipient, you're able to use MTM. And that's something that you should be able to coordinate kind of like through your Medicaid. If you call the number on the back of your insurance card, they should be able to give you more information about that. But that's something that's available, and make sure that you have both timely and reliable transportation to things like healthcare appointments. And then there's Senior Med Express, which is run by DC Yellow Cab. And Senior Med Express provides eligible DC residents who are age 60 and older that have a certified medical condition, free round trip transportation to things like medical appointments or to health-related public benefits appointments. You can learn more about eligibility and enrollment by visiting the website or by calling the phone number. But like I said, this is primarily for folks who otherwise wouldn't be able to use public transit. So worth looking into if you are 60 and older. And I believe that you might be able to, depending on like what health insurance you have, some health insurances offer similar programs for folks. So what I recommend is if you are interested in sort of this non-emergency medical transport, if you go to the phone number or the website listed for customer service on your health insurance card, they should be able to tell you if they offer anything similar to this. So if you're not quite eligible for Senior Med Express and you're not on DC Medicaid, check with your own health insurance to see if there's something similar out there for you. Next, we will go into paratransit. So Metro Access is a public paratransit service for residents unable to use Metro Bus and Metro Rail due to a disability. Metro Access provides trips within the service area for Metro. So that includes DC, Montgomery and Prince George's counties in Maryland, Arlington, Fairfax, and Loudoun counties, and then Alexandria, Falls Church, and Fairfax in Virginia. So services are offered via the same service areas and hours as Metro Bus and Metro Rail. And then Metro Access customers can expect to pay up to $4.50 per trip. The applications for that can be requested online, in person, or over the phone. So like I said, Metro Access is specifically for folks who are unable to access public transit due to a disability. You've probably seen their vans throughout the city. They say Metro Access. They're the big white vans that have the blue and red detailing, but they help folks get to different places throughout the Metro service area. And then applications for this are requested online, in person, or over the phone. And I think I've even heard folks say that they can request a Metro Access application at their doctor's office. I don't know if this is all doctor's offices, but I've heard some folks say that they've been able to get them that way as well. So if you have a disability and you're unable to use Metro Bus or Metro Rail, highly recommend applying to Metro Access, because that's also kind of like a starting point for some other programs, including what I'm getting into right now, which is Transport DC. So in order to qualify for Transport DC, riders must have been registered with Metro Access, and they have to have a Metro Access ID number that must be presented when booking a ride with Transport DC. So Transport DC is kind of like a premium sort of service, specifically for Metro Access customers. So it provides taxi cab rides to and from any location within DC. So this is not necessarily along the Metro Bus and Metro rail service area, and then this is outside of Metro Bus, Metro Rail service hours as well. So qualified riders can book rides in advance and then pay reduced fares for trips to medical appointments, employment, and other essential destinations. It is done through the Department of For-Hire Vehicles here in DC, and then I believe it's also supported by the DC Office on Aging. So you can learn more about that by visiting that website. But like I said, in order to qualify for Transport DC, you have to have already applied for Metro Access. So those are our paratransit options. And then up next, we have ride shares. So I get a lot of questions about these, and I'm happy to dig into whatever folks are interested in hearing more about. But the two main ones that are available here in DC are Uber and Lyft. So these are ride-hailing services. They're app-based, and they connect passengers with drivers via the mobile app. So what you do is you enter where you are currently located, you enter what your destination is, and then you get matched with a nearby driver. There are a couple of different ride options per Uber and Lyft. There are different sizes of vehicles that you can request. You can request wheelchair accessible vehicles, larger vehicles for groups, luxury car options, things like that. Some of the other neat things that you can also do with Uber and Lyft is you can schedule rides in advance, which I know that I have done a couple of times, because I've used Uber and Lyft in advance if I am planning a trip to the airport and want to make sure that I get picked up on time. So you can schedule rides in advance directly through the app. You can also set multiple pickup or drop-off points. So like if you wanted to pick up a couple of friends on the way to church or on the way to a rec center, you can start by like picking you up and then pick up a friend and pick up another friend and then drop everybody off at the same place. You can also do multiple drop-offs. So let's say you and a couple of friends are headed to your homes. You can set, let's stop here, drop this person off, stop here, drop this person off, things like that. And then payments are all made directly through the app. And then if you are not an app person, there is a company that can help arrange rideshare options and meal and grocery delivery as well. The name is a little silly. It's called Go Grandparent. But like I said, they're a company where you can you essentially call a number, and you can have them set up your Uber and Lyft rides. They can also do grocery delivery through Instacart. They can do meal delivery through DoorDash. So they operate on a membership model, and they have different tiers based on service use. But if that's something that you're interested in, and maybe, like I said, you're not a big app person, or your phone isn't compatible with some of these apps, Go Grandparent is a great option for making sure that you're still able to kind of access all of these services without having to deal with having the app on your phone and having to use it. So a couple of different options there. And then a few other transportation options. So I'm not sure if you've seen them around the city, but VO is they have like rental, I guess they're scooters. They look like bikes. But they're electric, they're motorized, so you don't have to like pedal them or anything. And they're actually proposing a three-wheeled motorized vehicle that is specifically geared towards older adults and people with mobility challenges. Not sure exactly where that is in the process, but that's something that might be popping up in the next couple of years here in DC. And then, of course, we have standard bicycles. pedal powered vehicles for individual or shared use. There are also e-bikes. Here in DC, we have Capital Bike Share, and they offer both pedal powered and e-bike options for folks who are interested in and able to use bicycles. DC has one of the most built out protected bike lane networks in the United States. So if that's something that's of interest to folks, that's definitely an option as well. And then, of course, there's walking, the simple method of using one's own 2 feet to get around, which, of course, promotes physical activity and a healthy lifestyle as well. And for the folks who are big fans of walking from place to place, there's actually something later on in the presentation. It's a tool that you can use to report unsafe sidewalk conditions throughout the city. I love DC. It's a great city to walk in, but some of the sidewalks are frankly dangerous to use. And so, like I said, there's a way to let the city know that there are parts of the sidewalk that need repairs. So we'll get into that a little later. But yeah, any questions so far on those different transportation systems, programs, things like that?
No, I don't have any.
Perfect. Okay. So the next thing that we're going to jump into is sort of this idea. Like I said, I wanted to get us thinking about what our own individual transportation needs are, how we get around, things like that. So let's look at, we already kind of talked about some of these transportation options. There's walking and biking, there's public transportation. Something we haven't touched on yet, is there also different volunteer transportation options. And now I'm not super familiar with everything that the Brookland Intergenerational Village offers, but I know that some of the DC villages have volunteers that are able to help members get to places. It's something that you usually have to schedule in advance. I'm sure that Nicole can answer any questions about that later on, but that's also often an option. There's also, reaching out to friends and family members about rides, things like that. There's taxis, Uber, Lyft, specialized repair transit, and then, of course, friends and family. With each of these transportation options, of course, there is a cost to them. And we've kind of touched on some of the costs involved with these throughout the presentation so far. Something that we haven't gone too much into just yet is the type of planning that is required with these different transportation options. So let's say you want to walk to the grocery store. That's great. That's something that you can just decide to do and then leave whenever you want. But if you want to have a volunteer help you get from point A to point B, that's something that you need to be scheduling in advance. If you're going to use paratransit, that's something that you're going to need to schedule in advance. If you're going to use a taxi or an Uber or a Lyft, that's something that you can do a little bit more immediately. And so thinking about, okay, maybe it makes sense for you to sit down at the beginning of your week, and as you're kind of thinking about, okay, these are the things that I have on my schedule. I have this doctor's appointment. I'm going to need to pick up this prescription. There's, this class at the rec center that I want to go to, things like that. It might also make sense when you're thinking about those things to also be thinking about, and how am I going to get to and from these different things that I want to be going to? Is this something that I'm going to need to schedule in advance? If I'm going to have a volunteer help me get to somewhere, who am I going to need to call to make sure that that's set up and so that the person is ready to come get me when I need them? Things like that. And then also, when it comes to cost planning, a lot of folks are on sort of fixed budgets, making sure that you're aware of the cost of some of these different transportation options that you're going to be using as well. Um, and then, of course, the different places that you can get to with some of these different options. Because some of them, like paratransit or the non-emergency medical transport, those are only to be used for um medical appointments, benefits appointments, things like that. There might be some guidelines around where volunteers are able to help you get to. It might be like a necessary amenity thing. It might have to be a doctor's appointment. Whereas if you have a friend or a family member helping you get to somewhere, they can help get you anywhere you need to go to. If you're looking to take public transportation, you need to make sure that the place that you're going to is able to be accessed by public transportation. And sometimes that might look like taking the train and then switching to the bus, or it might look like taking the bus and then walking a little bit. So sometimes different trips require a little bit of a combination of different transportation options and making sure that we're aware of that. Um, if this was an in-person presentation, I would of course be asking people, how is it that you got here today? It's a little different when we're doing a Zoom presentation. So I won't ask that question. But yeah, things to be keeping in mind. Where is it that you need to get to? How are you able to get there? How much does it cost? How in advance do you need to be planning it? Keeping these things in mind. Also considering things like time of day, distances, and safety as well. Now that it's the winter months, it's getting darker sooner. It's often getting colder in the evenings. Maybe taking the bus or walking is a little bit more practical to do during the day, but maybe you don't necessarily feel comfortable doing a lot of walking at night. I completely understand that. So making sure that these are things that we're keeping in mind as we're doing our own transportation planning as well. We kind of touched on this already, this idea of the personal transportation support network. So thinking about who it is in our lives that are able to help us get from point A to point B when we need it. Like I said, when I was injured last year, my dad was someone who was helping me get around. He lives locally, so that was really helpful for me. So thinking about who is it in your life that would be able to help you if you needed the support. Maybe it's a family member, maybe it's a neighbor, maybe it's a coworker. A lot of us might have family members who live here in the area. Some of us might not. So thinking about who it is that we can call upon to help us get to the things that we need to get to. Um, Education is the most powerful weapon which you can use to change the world. This is a quote from Nelson Mandela. So the rest of the presentation, we're going to be talking a little bit about now that we have an idea of some of these programs that are available, some of these services that exist here in DC, what we can do now with this information. Like I mentioned earlier, I highly recommend adding your voice to transportation planning whenever the opportunity arises. So here in DC, a lot of the transportation here is overseen or somewhat impacted by funding or otherwise the District Department of Transportation. Above that is the Transportation Planning Board, which is kind of like the state level for us. And then, of course, we are under the DC Department of Transportation. Um, with the District Department of Transportation, they often do a lot of like public meetings and hearings and things like that when they are planning new projects, when they are looking at budgeting, when they are thinking about making different changes to the system. And I highly encourage folks, if you are someone who uses some of these different services, that making sure that you are able to share your experience is such an important part of the process. when folks who use these services aren't sharing their experiences with the people who are making the decisions about budget and service and things like that, those decisions get made without that input. And that can have a really negative impact on what's available for the people who use it. So, like I said, really important to make sure that you're sharing your feedback. That's the way that these things get better and easier for folks to use. So always recommend adding your voice when you can. Like I mentioned earlier, we're going to touch just a little bit on how to file a sidewalk repair request. So this is something that's done through 311. So you can call 311. The specific phone number is 202-727-1000. There's also a service request online that you can use through the Service Request Center. So it asks you a bunch of different questions. I think it'll generally ask you like, what's the nearest cross street to where the sidewalk area is. It'll ask you, as you can see, the type of sidewalk for the request. So is it concrete? Is it brick? Is it asphalt? Is it something else? Is the sidewalk raised, and is it a trip hazard? Is there like an indent or a pothole, and is that dangerous for anybody who might be wheeling over it? Things like that. And I think that if you are someone who walks around DC or otherwise navigates sidewalks here in DC, there are a lot of spots that need attention. And this is a great way to make sure that that happens. So highly, highly recommend using this tool. It makes a big difference for the community. It makes a big difference for being able to get around safely. And your neighbors will be grateful. This is time specific, so I get that folks that might be watching this later, it might not be relevant for, but I did want to make sure that I shared this just in case folks do watch between now and the 14th. Go DC Go is a program of the District Department of Transportation, and they do these in-person travel trainings. So it's a free training for DC residents to help build confidence and feel comfortable using sustainable transportation options offered here in DC. So you're going to be talking about Metro Rail, Metro Bus, things like that. I think they might be talking about some of the different like Capital Bike Share. They might be talking about some of the scooters, things like that. You do get some cool swag for attending. They give you a goodie bag. You get a $20 Smart Trip card. You get a free ride code for Capital Bike Share, and they give out refreshments. And the next one of these in-person travel trainings is at the MLK Library, which is 901 G Street Northwest. And it is this Saturday, December 14th from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. So if that is of interest to you, I highly recommend going. Go DC Go does some great programming. They're awesome. They show up at a lot of the different like community events and festivals and stuff throughout DC. So if you are interested in kind of expanding on some of the things that you learned about today and get some more sort of like tangible confidence and comfortability using transit, highly recommend giving this a shot. And it's at the MLK Library, which is great. And then the one last thing that I have for y'all. So as part of this project, Capitol Hill Village has created and is maintaining a website that is all about transportation. So even after the funding for this particular grant cycle runs out, like this website is going to continue to be updated. As we know, there are always updates to things involving public transit here in DC, different budget changes, service changes. I've had a couple of questions about things like Are they expanding the metro? Does the yellow line go all the way to Greenbelt? Things like that. And some of these things that are kind of like in the process or might be changing. I had somebody once ask me information about the purple line, which is still in development. This website is going to continue to update all of this information. So chvtransportation.wixsite.com/DCTC. Check this out. I will flag that the website is still kind of a work in progress, and we have had some people mention that it's slow to load. So if you're having any issues loading it, I highly recommend hitting refresh, and then that should help. And of course, that can be done if you go up in your browser to this little circle with the arrow button, that's right next to where you enter the websites. That is the refresh button, and the website should come up a little faster that way. But yeah, and with that, that's what I have for y'all today. Any questions?
No,
Thank
just
you so much, Stephanie. That was
thank
such great
you.
information.
Yeah,
It
and then
was. Thank you so
Nicole,
much.
now that you are back, I don't know if there was anything that you wanted to share in particular about how volunteer transportation works with Brookland Intergenerational Village. If y'all have volunteer transportation options for folks, any sort of information that you want to share about that, feel free to.
Sure. So with our village, with full membership, you do have access to driving and request services related to transportation. So that might include if you need help kind of navigating some of the transportation options that Stephanie talked about. If you need help with any ride share request, we can help kind of from that technology navigation sense. If you actually need a ride somewhere, we do have volunteers that have offered and are available to provide rides to our members. We do request that you ask for the ride about 7 to 5 days in advance and give us the details so that we can find the appropriate volunteer that can fit your schedule. And so you can do that by calling the office number that's on the website, or you can send us an email at info@brooklandvillage.org. And so those are kind of the breadth of transportation support options that we have at the village. And we're also happy to be a first resource if you have any questions, and we can point you in the right direction when it comes to transportation access and different programs.
Thank you so very much. This was very helpful.
Absolutely. And then Nicole, I'm not sure if there was anything else in general that you wanted to add, any questions that you wanted to ask kind of on behalf of the members. But that's
I do have a question because I heard different things about the senior smart trip card program continuing or being funded. Do you have any insight into that?
okay. So I haven't heard anything about the senior smart trip card, but I'm wondering if you are thinking of the connector card,
Oh, maybe that's it. Yes, it's
which
the
is a
connector
different
card.
program. And I don't have anything about the connector card in this presentation simply because essentially it's a program that is funded, I think it's funded by the Department on Aging. Essentially it works almost like a debit card that's used for transportation options. It's specifically for older adults. I'm not exactly sure what the age cutoff is, but because that program does not currently have any additional funding, they are not taking any new applicants. So
Okay,
like
that's what it
there's
was. Yes.
there's information on the CHV Wix site that I listed that will tell you things like what the maximum amount of money on the card can be. There were some things with folks who had the cards needed to recertify by, I think it was October 31st, or they'd lose the card, some things regarding that. And like I said, all of that information is on the website. But they are not currently taking new applicants. And so I didn't want to like advertise a program that isn't actually available for people right now.
Hmm.
But there's information. I think we might even have the link to their website on our website. So if funding, like when funding opens up for that,
Right.
if they are accepting new applicants, that's something that should be updated there as well.
Okay. Yeah, I think that was part of the confusion because people would come to us, and I think they might have confused some of the terminology of
There are
senior
so
smart
many
trip card versus
cards.
connector card. And so
Yes,
that helps clarify things because we're
correct.
planning on doing a senior smart trip card pop-up hopefully in the future, and we want to make sure that that's still going to be available.
Perfect. Yes. I haven't heard anything about the senior smart trip card going away, which I am thrilled that I haven't heard anything about it going away because, like I said, a 50% discount is huge.
Yeah.
And it's so easy to qualify for it. You know, like I said, you just have to be 65 and older and live in DC. So yeah, I think it's great that y'all are thinking about doing a pop-up. I think that that's something that I have been surprised at how many people I have done these presentations for that qualify for it that don't already have it,
Mm-hmm.
because it is so easy to qualify for it. Yes, I get that like having to sign up for it in person can be like a major barrier. But I am glad that it sounds like WMATA is trying to make that as easy as they can with regards to having the multiple locations popping up at different community events. And it sounds like some of the villages are able to
Mm-hmm.
collaborate to like bring them to them. And I think that that's fantastic.
Yes, I agree. Well, thank you so much for all this
Thank you.
information and the presentation. We'll definitely share this with the larger village membership.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. I had a great time. Um, I'm super passionate about transportation, and I'm always happy to share this information with folks.
We appreciate it. Well, have a good afternoon.
You do the same, Nicole. Bye.